Can you speak to the men that have issues creating boundaries? How do you go about creating those boundaries? Because it's easy in concept to achieve what you're talking about. But to actually place the boundaries down, there has to be a connection to self and loving thyself in order for boundaries to be laid down, especially from a man.
Yeah, because you have to feel like your boundaries are worthy and that they're valuable and they're valid. and I actually think men are better boundary setters than women. I think because women are such pleasers and they want to please men, I think women have a harder time. They might set a boundary, but actually enforcing it and executing it, especially if it makes him mad, because that's scary for women. I know with my husband and I, there have been times, and I'm not telling on him, this is public knowledge, he preaches about it from the pulpit, but there was a time and he was stressed and dealing with something, and he was angry and he wanted to blame me. And so he's getting going and he's angry. And my husband's very passionate. He's very intense. And he's using some colorful language. And I just said to him, I go, hold on. I said, this is so not about me. I said, you need to figure out what's going on. Maybe you need to take it to Jesus. I'm leaving. I'll come back. I'm not abandoning you. I'll be back, but I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. And I removed myself. And he said that day, that moment, it was like, it just, something landed on him and he was like, oh my gosh. Like he realized this was about him. This had nothing to do with me, but I've made a great sounding board, but I didn't like the way he was talking to me. So I just said, I'm going to walk away. And that was my boundary. You know, you don't put boundaries on other people. Your boundary is for you. And it's like, for me, I refuse to listen to that kind of language and that tone of voice and the volume in which you're talking. So when you can calm down and talk to me like a human and respectfully, I'll be back. And and we've had to do that a few times. But I think men need to step up and take their role and realize women are emotional. And sometimes women get crazy. We get crazy and can get hysterical and emotional. And I think it's okay for men to say, stop. No, hold on. Okay, we're going to calm down and take the emotion out of it. I mean, go ahead and have your feelings. Feelings aren't good, bad, right, or wrong. They're your feelings. But we're not going to go that way. And I think men need to step up and lead. A woman wants a leader. That's sexy. That's attractive. And sometimes I like when my husband stands up to me, not in a harsh, abusive way, but there's been times where I've said things and he'll be like, no, we're not going that way. We're not, and that's enough. And I've heard enough and I want you to stop. And I'm like, okay. And because I respect him, I'll listen, but I'll definitely push it.
Sure.
But I realize too that I can get emotional about things and he's the more rational, logical one. And then sometimes we trade places. Sometimes he gets emotional and I'm the more logical one. Sometimes we trade roles. It just depends on what the situation and what the subject is.
It sounds like, I remember I was interviewing John Wineland and he said, the yoga of relationship and the yoga of sexuality and the yoga of everything, it's this constant maintaining, almost like if there's weeds in your garden, you pull them every day, right? Otherwise they take out the plants and the produce. Relationships the same way. But I think what happens is, and I wonder how you feel about this, we get imprinted, Danielle. We get imprinted by, like, for example, in my own life, my mom raised a single mom, raised my brother and I in San Diego, California, and she was manic bipolar, had a really hard time. And so I developed hypervigilance. Hypervigilance meaning I'm always thinking a shoe is going to drop.
Right.
And coming from a bipolar system like that, I've been through many relationships before now, my 5-year loving relationship where we have children and we're creating so much good and beauty in our lives and in our family. But I had to earn getting there. And by turning the mirror on myself, or I like to talk about this, by shining the lantern on myself and others, which is really what this podcast is, I was able to illuminate these parts of myself that it sounds like your husband also got illuminated, where you were like, hey, this isn't about me. This is about you. And this is about you doing your work. For people that have struggled, let's just say for a man who struggled with an overbearing mother or a mother with emotional issues or mental health issues, what have you seen actually help men to regulate themselves when in sacred union, marriage, relationship, that they can really do that inner work on themselves. Is there a starting place for that? I mean, that's a whole podcast on its own. But is there a starting place for a man who's been in that situation with a mother where it was conflictual and where there was some overbearingness? What's a good starting place for that, for him to begin doing his inner work so he can show up more loving for his woman?
Right. Well, I think for a man that, has some wounds and has dealt with trauma in his past. I know my husband his mom died when he was 5 years old. His dad was very abusive. And so he probably, I would say, and he believes too, that he has like a root of rejection. He has abandonment issues because he's 5 and his mom was gone, And so for us, there was definitely work he had to do, his own personal development, but there's things that I could say or do that trigger him, but I'm not responsible for his triggers. He's responsible for his triggers, because that a trigger says, oh, there's still some undealt with stuff there that needs to be dealt with, needs to be addressed, needs to be healed. And however you go about doing that, for my husband, he's had a lot of healing through the Word of God, through learning about who he is, as his value as a man, as a human being, and had to learn the self-love, and that even if I were to leave him, that God will never leave him, so but that's hard. I mean, and again, we've been married 44 years, and there's still times where he'll feel, if I say something that lands on him as disrespectful, in my heart, I might not be trying to disrespect him at all, but it landed on him as disrespectful, and he will come unglued. And for me, I just have to go, oh, wow, okay, I am so sorry. That wasn't my intention, but I'm so sorry that, gosh, the way I said that, give me another chance. Let me go again. Let me rephrase that maybe. And I always tell him, my intention was never to disrespect you. I love you. I think the world of you. But there's certain ways I say things, or my tone, or the words I choose. And sometimes I mess it up, And so I think we have to give each other that grace. But for him, I know he's had healing. He's had to do a lot of his personal work. As a starting place, I would say God would be the starting place, because again, he's your creator. And the more you learn about God and know who he is, the more you learn about who you are and who he created you to be. There's always therapy, that would be great. I know there's trauma counselors and stuff. God might be a good starting place, but you might need to talk to a therapist to help you walk it through or walk it out. I don't really deal a lot with trauma. In what I do, but I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm ordained pastor.
Sure. Well, and also too, there's a black slippery slope where there is this sitting and bathing in the feelings that can actually just reinforce those feelings. And so you have to have a really skilled therapist. Caveat to the audience listening and watching. Some of these therapists, they actually just perpetuate the issue, because they'll continue to have their patient or their couple coming in just bathe in the problem.
Right.
But there's really no tools or solutions offered. So I loved what you said, that your husband did his inner work. For me, it was really understanding that I am loved, and I've always been loved by that which created me. And it wasn't honestly until I was probably halfway through this decade of podcasting where I had many circumstances where there was just absolutely no explanation, Danielle, that I was loved, but I could feel it. It's knowing with your eyes closed and believing and having faith with your eyes open that you're loved and nothing will ever change that. That's, I think, the crux of what we're talking about today. And it's part of the bifurcation with men and women. There's a lack of self-love, but there's a lack of knowing that you are loved by that which created you.
Well, and the way you develop self-love and self-esteem and self-worth, I heard one person who has been a mentor to me, she said, you have to earn that. Like when you do good things, it makes you feel good about yourself. When you make good decisions, it makes you feel good about yourself. That builds your self-worth, your self-confidence, your self-esteem. When you're giving to others, it's not about giving and doing, making good decisions. Like I'm really angry. I want to scream and yell and call names, but that's not going to benefit anybody in the long run. So I'm not going to talk that way. I'm really proud of myself that I didn't talk that way. Just making good decisions build your self-esteem, doing things that make you proud of yourself. maybe it's getting your education. You want to get a degree and you do that and you were disciplined enough to see it all the way through, or I'm going to exercise and work out, 4 days this week. And then you do it and you're true to yourself and you do what you said you were going to do. That makes you feel good about yourself. I kept my word to myself. And all those little things, little by little, it's like brick by brick, it builds your self-love, your self-worth, your self-esteem. The things that rip your self-esteem apart is when you do things that go against your moral values, go against what you stand for, go against your integrity. That's what makes you feel bad about yourself and wrecks your self-love. And you can't really have self-love, again, unless you know who you are in the eyes of God. And if you understand that he loves you no matter what, no matter your sin, no mistake you make is more potent than God's love for you. There's nothing you can do that's going to cause him to separate from you. And when you understand that, I mean, we all need grace. I've been a Christian, for over 40 years. I still make mistakes. I still blow it. I still sin. Okay. But I know that I have the grace. Thank God for the grace of God on my life. People ask how we've stayed married all these years. And both my husband and I both say, because of the grace of God, not because we are perfect humans. Believe us, we've made every mistake, but it is the grace of God. And we believe he's our tuning fork, everything we do, he's our tuning fork. So,
hey, if you loved that clip you just saw, watch the full video. That clip was just a taste, just a piece, the tip of the freaking iceberg of what you just witnessed and what you just felt. Click the link on this screen, subscribe to the podcast, click the link on this screen if you're vibrating, if you're resonating, if you feel what I'm putting down.